Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this short gaming Tedacon video, are you hyped for the next generation systems? Well, the answer is you should be, because Sony have officially confirmed key technical details for the PS5. Let's go through the Cliff Notes version of the specifications before delving more in depth into them. First things first, we have a Zen 2 based CPU. Next, we have a Navi based GPU, and it is officially confirmed by Mark Cerny, who acts as the lead architect for the PS5. He also served the same duty for the PS4 and the Vita. It is officially confirmed by him that we will have ray tracing support for the PS5. We will have backwards compatibility with the PS4, so in other words, you can plonk your PS4 discs into the PS5 and, well, you can guess what happens. And finally, we have a next generation SSD into the system. Apparently, according to Sony, this was one of his goals early on because load times for the system and general I/O, in other words, getting data from the internal storage into the main system memory, has always been a bottleneck, because when it comes to, say, streaming data and just, general load times, it's always been a frustration for both developers as well as Sony. So that's one of the key things they wanted to tackle early on. So let's start things out with the SSD, because yes, it may not be as exciting as the number of threads inside a new CPU or something like that, but it is quite interesting because Sony is putting an awful lot of emphasis on this particular point. According to him, in Sony's own tests, it's up to 19 times faster than the old PlayStation 4 load times. In other words, it can stream data that much faster. There are a couple of things he also specified, and that is, first of all, it was one of their goals from early on, and secondly, that it is faster than any currently available PC SSD. He did not go into details, though, exactly what the technology entails. If I had to guess, it would probably be a new bus like PCIe 4.0. Now, I will say that in the past, Sony have overhyped things for the next generation systems, like they did for the PS4, if you remember their supercharged PC architecture. So, from my personal opinion, most likely they're using a next generation SSD that has been custom fitted for the PS5, and most likely using a PCIe 5.0 bus, but that is pure speculation on my part, so we're going to have to wait and see for official confirmation. Moving on to the CPU and GPU. By far, these have been the longest lasting rumours for the PS5. For a number of months, we've been hearing so many different whispers that the PlayStation 5 would have some type of Zen-based CPU, and Forbes, along with a couple of other websites a while ago, also leaked that Navi was being designed for the PS5. Well, guess what? Yes, it's true. According to Mark Cerny, we have an 8-core Zen 2 based processor. He did not detail either the clock speed or, for that matter, the number of threads. So for those unfamiliar with the Zen 2 architecture, or actually the Zen architecture in general, Zen is capable of SMT. If you're unfamiliar with that, think of like Intel's hyperthreading. You can run 2 threads on the same processor core. From the leaks, well, it looks like it does actually have SMT. So 8 processor cores, 16 threads. Oh, and that does not mean that it's like 16 CPU cores. SMT, depending on the application, can be anything from like a 30% speed up to a 50% speed up, but it does depend on architecture and the code that it is being run. Either way, it's very impressive that we have an 8-core, 16-thread CPU. 16 threads, by the way, has not been confirmed, just to clarify, but the 8 cores certainly have been. As for the GPU, yes, Navi. No T-flops have been announced, no clock speeds have been announced, no number of compute units or any technical details other than it's Navi. The only other bit of information we have, I say a little bit as if it's not important, is that the PlayStation 5 GPU does support ray tracing. This is interesting for several reasons. The first of which is, you might recall if you're a regular viewer, maybe a couple of weeks or so ago, I was speaking to a source who confirmed to me that Navi 20, which is the big Navi chip which is going to launch in 2020, would support ray tracing. So if you're unfamiliar with the timeline or what Navi is the next generation of GPUs from AMD. Currently we have Polaris as well as Vega. These will be essentially replaced, from what we're hearing, by Navi. Navi 10 is going to launch this year. We actually got a lot of Navi stuff, so I'm going to hold back on some information with Navi until later on in the video. But Navi is going to release this year, and it's going to target like mid-range NVIDIA hardware. But next year, AMD are going to release a bigger Navi chip. It's going to have higher performance targets, and is obviously going to be more expensive. I was told by that particular chip we would actually see a ray tracing implemented, but not on Navi 10, the chip that's going to launch this year. Sony then are actually going to be implementing it for the PlayStation 5. And that's really interesting because it means that, well, Xbox is almost certainly going to have ray tracing because obviously they've been pushing a DXR. It also means that ray tracing and PC gaming are going to have a very interesting time for themselves over the next couple of years. Obviously, NVIDIA have been pushing ray tracing with the Turing architecture. Some have said that it hasn't quite hit the performance targets that we were hoping for. Others have said that, well, it's just so early at the moment, the games developers haven't gotten their head around it. But either way, in the next couple of years, developers are certainly going to have a good understanding of ray tracing because it's going to be of paramount importance as well for consoles. The only other key technical detail we heard is it's got 3D audio for the PlayStation 5. Not much information was provided here. It's quite interesting because in an interview I had with NVIDIA, they told me that ray tracing is capable of doing 3D positional audio as well as AI. So how does it benefit AI? Well, mostly when it comes to actually understanding its environments. Like, just think of it this way. When you enter a room, you're acutely aware, unless you're very clumsy, of the filing cabinet that's to your left, right? Or perhaps the wall that's there and all of these other, details of the surrounding environment. So with ray tracing, because it essentially has really good understanding of the environment because, well, it kind of fires all these different rays around to figure out where light normally would be bouncing to different objects, but it can also do that as well to get a really good understanding of the environment for other things, such as how audio would bounce around in a specific set of materials. For example, let's say that you're in a tunnel that's kind of rocky, but it kind of curves off a little bit to the left, but also to the right, it's got kind of like this chasm that just expands ever outwards. Well, obviously it's going to sound really different compared to if you're walking in an open field, right? So ray tracing can certainly help there. If I had to guess, and this is purely a guess, but the custom chip inside the PlayStation 5 for the audio will most likely also have some type of communication with the ray tracing chips as well. And if I also had to guess further, this would be of paramount importance for things such as the VR headset that we know Sony are going to be releasing for the PS5. The inevitable question then is, well, what about Microsoft? We are waiting for Microsoft to reveal details of their system. I've heard from multiple different people, though, that Microsoft are not going to let Sony have the performance advantage. It was one of the things that really kicked them in the shin for the original Xbox. If you recall, they lost a lot of sales simply because the PS4 was the most powerful system at launch. That's like no ifs and buts. It was the most powerful system. And obviously, Sony marketed that system as the most powerful, and clearly Microsoft don't want that egg on their face again. With that said though, we don't know which is going to be the most powerful. It's also possible that Sony have a more powerful GPU than Microsoft, or Microsoft have a more powerful GPU than Sony. We don't know the number of compute units, we don't know the clock speeds of these systems, and we certainly don't know key architectural details right now. So all we can do is just wait and see what happens. But we're not done with rumours yet, because we have more Navi information for you. And this comes to us via the website tweaktown. They actually have said that their sources have told them that Navi would indeed be releasing on the 7th of July. Now the reason that's really interesting is because I was told exactly the same thing by a couple of different sources now as well. So the 7th of July is certainly looking to be a very appealing date if you were to put a bet of when AMD are going to be releasing their next generation GPUs. But they also provided a bit of additional information, and that is that apparently Navi is not going to be targeting RTX 2070 for its performance targets. Oh no. No, 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 no. In fact, AMD are targeting the RTX 20. If you could do your own drum roll, please, that would be great. RTX 2080. Now, this means that they would be the first website to report that performance target, which is very important. I've personally had multiple sources tell me that AMD were targeting RTX 2070, but it does not preclude this being accurate. It doesn't mean that AMD have to increase the number of compute units. All they have to do is crank the clock speeds up. And just like we've seen with the APU, which supposedly was the PS5, which had a very aggressive clock speed for the GPU, I think it was around 1800 MHz, it's possible AMD are just more confident now and able to increase the clock speeds of the GPU core higher than what they had originally anticipated. It's also possible that their yields are better. And this is pure speculation on my part. I do not know the number of compute units. No sources have told me the number of compute units. I want to stress that because I do not want to be misquoted. But let's just assume for the sake of this video that the highest end Navi SKU has 40 compute units that AMD were originally targeting, but they had maybe a couple of additional ones for yield reasons because they felt, hey, we think that there are going to be a number of compute units which do not function because we're not too confident of 7nm yields. So maybe they were building the GPU with 44 compute units with the expectation that a number of them, let's say 2 to 3 compute units, would be damaged on the creation of the GPU. It's possible though that the yields are just better and therefore they feel really confident of just having 42 compute units enabled. That is pure speculation though. My guess is that instead we just have higher clock frequencies. It does mean an inevitable question though. Are AMD going to really be releasing a card which is RTX 2080 performance capable for $300 US? I don't know about that. I think that would be incredibly generous of the company. They could easily sell that GPU for $500 or even $600 US, and people would just be very happy to purchase the card. So we're just going to have to wait and see. I do believe that by the midpoint of July, we are going to have Navi released. As for the performance targets, I think it's going to be at least RTX 2070. I do wonder about the pricing. I've heard from a couple of different sources it's going to be RX 590-ish in terms of pricing at highest. But obviously, if these performance targets, these revised performance targets are accurate, I don't see AMD launching these cards at $300 US, or even $350 or even $400 US actually, but then capable of outperforming the RTX 2080. But I could be wrong there. We're just going to have to wait. And it's going to be really interesting if this is accurate, how Nvidia are going to respond. We also have a small update for the next generation Zen processors. No, not Zen 2, but Zen 3. According to TSMC, the 7nm Plus manufacturing process, which uses EUV, is going to be very impressive indeed, because according to TSMC, 7nm Plus can support up to 20% additional density and 10% reduction in power consumption. From AMD's own slides, the primary thing they're targeting with Zen Plus is lower power consumption and most presumably higher clocks, but with higher density as well, they might be able to squeeze in additional cache or maybe even additional CPU cores, but almost certainly what AMD will probably going to target is just lower power consumption. It's going to be really interesting by the time Zen 3 launches because we can presume Intel are going to be in full swing with its own next generation CPUs as well. So I guess over the next couple of years, PC and just general hardware is going to be going absolutely nuts. And finally we have the 2700X 50th anniversary edition processor that has been spotted by a chap by the name of Damon on Twitter. I actually regularly follow him, and he and I interact quite frequently as well. So I would advise you to give him a follow. He's a really cool guy. In his findings on the internet, he's actually discovered a retailer which is advertising the 2700X 50th anniversary chip. Now, it does not have clock speed information yet provided. So all we know is it's going to be an 8-core, 16-thread CPU. And it is, once again, to celebrate the 50th anniversary of AMD. The slight sad face about this, though, is that I was kind of hoping that we would get that chip for the Zen 2 based CPUs. Maybe AMD just felt that by the time the CPUs launch, which is once again rumoured to be at some point in July, I've heard once again July 7th, the same date as Navi. I'll have to wait and see if that's true. So it's probable that AMD just felt, well, you know, it's a bit late to celebrate our 50th at that point. And supposedly there will just be a very limited number of these processors which launch, which makes sense because A, it's an anniversary edition, and B, we are so close now to the Ryzen 3000 series. Oh, and pricing is going to be, at least according to this retailer, around $340 US. With all of that said, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Do subscribe if you want more information on the PlayStation 5 specifications. When Microsoft reveal their specifications, I'll be doing a much greater in-depth analysis between the two systems. And if you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to, well, subscribe to the channel as well as give us a like. You can also find us down below on the social medias as well as Patreon and Amazon affiliate links if you so desire. But I'm going to get going, so take care of yourselves. Bye for now.